Okay. Hi. Hello, everybody. So you may, hopefully, you can hear me. Okay. I can't monitor this. I'm recording on a phone. Um, so yeah, you may notice a difference in the sound quality. Although you should have nice background crickets because we're sitting outside right now. And by we, I mean me. Don't read anything into that. Um, so yeah. A thing happened a few days ago where I went to turn my computer on and it didn't turn on. So it is now in the shop as of today. And I was sad. I'm still worried, but I was sad because also I've been on, I've been a bit more on a Harry Potter abridged kick of late. And so, excuse me, I wanted to make more episodes, and so I was speaking to Adva today, and she said that I should do Harry Potter unplugged, as it were, using my phone instead of the computer, and she's going to help me out with the video visual thing part that will help put it on the YouTube place for you to listen. And so yeah, so I've decided to do that. So after all of that introduction, yes, this is in fact Harry Potter Abridged, unplugged, um, and we are doing Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, as most of you will know that are following along. This is chapter 10 in that book, and it is called The Rogue Bludger. At the let's see, at the end of the last chapter, yes, our lovely trio had decided. Well, really, let's be real. Hermione had suggested, and they had decided to agree with her, after a bit of persuasion, that they would brew some polyjuice potion, which is like one of the most complex potions ever mentioned in the books, short of maybe like Veritaserum or something like that, and they were going to use that to sneak into the Slytherin common room, disguised as other Slytherin students, to see if they could find out if Draco Malfoy is in fact the heir of Slytherin, because they're all fairly convinced that that's possible, even though Hermione, and this is the interesting part to me, Hermione is the most skeptical of the whole idea that Draco is the heir of Slytherin, and yet she's also the most persistent about about making the potion. Like, she explains it and talks about the book that they've got to get and all of that, and then well, there's more coming up in this chapter, so we can go ahead and get into the chapter itself. Right. So we ended with them talking about getting the needing to get a note to get this book, because the book that has the polyjuice potion recipe in it is called Mosty Potenty Potions, because of course it is, and it's in the restricted section in the library, which means you have to get a note from a teacher. And of course, the last chapter led us directly into this one, because Ron's like, no teacher's going to give us that. They'd have to be really thick. And then we start off in Lockhart's class to, pay off that little comment. And we get a note here that since the whole Pixies disaster with Lockhart, he hasn't brought any creatures to class since then. And so now his classes basically are reenactments of chapters from his books, with in many cases Harry being picked to help him with these reenactments. And Harry is cooperating, we find out, mostly because he's trying to keep Lockhart in a good mood towards him, and thereby proxy, I guess, Ron and Hermione, because everybody knows that they're friends. Anyway, so there's just some silliness with him playing a part. As acting as a werewolf, so he's having to howl and all this good stuff, and right, and blah 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 blah. And so the bell rings and the class is over, and their homework is that they have to compose a poem about his defeat of the Wagga Wagga werewolf, and he gives away signed copies of his autobiography to the winner of the competition, which apparently is what it is. So Harry joins back up with Ron and Hermione, and they go to the front of the classroom, and Hermione approaches Lockhart and asks about getting the book out, and she makes a reference to one of Lockhart's books, Gadding with Ghouls, and he's all like, "Oh yes, Gadding with Ghouls, it's my favorite." Right, so they just like have a little a flattering party, because like Hermione's like, "Oh, so clever the way you trapped that last one with a tea strainer." And he's calling her like the best student in the year, and all this good shit. So that's cute. Oh, Hermione. Right, and so oh, wait a minute, my phone isn't going to sleep over there. It needs to, right? I need it to be recording and not have the screen on. See, sorry, just checking something here. And we are still recording, yes. Okay, cool. Right, and so, sorry about the interruption there. Oh, yes. So Lockhart pulls out this ridiculous peacock quill, and he's like, "I usually save it for book signings." I'm not even attempting to actually do like a true Lockhart voice. I just think that as long as it's ridiculous, then it's appropriate. And kind of like what we used to, so that in another lifetime, I did part-time radio, and when I first started, I was working in top 40 radio, and this is actually a true story, not like a funny fake true story. Since you know who I am, it's not like Swift. I don't have to. I don't get the luxury of making up all kinds of amazing backstories. But I've got a real one here. So yeah, in top 40 radio, in like, well, I'm not going to talk about when it was. It doesn't matter because it's basically the same now. The DJs talk with a little bit more of this, and our program director was always kind of like, they called it puking, like that pukey in your voice, and he was always kind of discouraging against it so that we didn't like sound too typical. But that's there's like a kind of thing with even with Lockhart, you know. Right, so oh yeah, and so before they can get away, after Lockhart scrawled his signature, literally, the one he practices so much, on Hermione's permission note for the book, he gets Harry's attention and is like, "Oh, I see you're playing Quidditch tomorrow, first match of the season against Slytherin," and he's like, "I was a seeker too," and all that good shit, and then he's like, "Yeah, I could have played for England, but you know, it's just, yeah." Anyway, so he offers Harry like any tips that he might provide. He's like, "I'm always happy to pass on my experience to less able players." He's just his ego knows no bounds. I mean, I know Rowling has said that she'll never reveal who she based Lockhart on, and that whoever the person is so arrogant that they'll never recognize themselves in this character. And that's just amazing to me, that she could actually come out and say that publicly and still never have that person be revealed. Oh, I want to know so bad. I mean, of course, it's probably not even like a public figure. I can't remember if she said if they're famous or not. I don't remember if they're like truly like the way that Lockhart is in this world. Whatever. And Harry's like, yeah, that's, yeah, I'll pencil you in for some tips there, Lucky. And so they get away, and Harry's marveling at the fact that Lockhart didn't even look at the book that she was checking out. And Ron, of course, points out that he's a brainless git, and Hermione, of course, gets defensive. He is not. Blah. And her and Ron do their her and Ron thing, a little back and forth, but then they kind of chill it out because they go into the library to go ahead and get the book. And Hermione doesn't want to let go of the permission form because it's got Lockhart's signature on it. And Ron reaches in and he yanks it out of her hand. He's like, "Don't worry, he'll sign anything if it doesn't move for long enough." So he's like, "We'll get you another one." And so Madam Pince like somehow is able to decide that it's legit, probably because of how beautiful the handwriting is. That's not to say that Hermione might not have beautiful handwriting too, although, well, whatever, it doesn't matter. I'm sure who the fuck knows how she knows what every teacher's, maybe she gets signatures at the beginning of the year. Let's not go too deep there. So Hermione gets the book, and then they go to Moaning Myrtle's bathroom again because Hermione just said that this was the best place this is the last place anyone would go, and so they're guaranteed to be, to have some privacy, as it were. So Hermione starts like looking through the book and finds the potion, and there's mentioned that there's like artwork in there depicting the effects of some of the potions, and apparently a lot of them are gruesome and scary, including the one for the Polyjuice potion. Harry said that well, not he said, but it's Harry sincerely hoped that the artist had imagined the looks of intense pain on their faces. They're talking about the people transforming. And Hermione says that this is the most complicated potion she's ever seen, which, even at their age, is saying a lot because she is a reading machine, and she doesn't. I wonder if I never thought about that before. I wonder if Rowling imagined that Hermione had a photographic memory, because I mean her. There's a difference between like memorizing a bunch of shit and then kind of forgetting it later, and then like truly taking it in and learning it, and or being able to just access it. And her access it's vast. She doesn't seem to have trouble recalling anything. Like, well, that's not true. There's something that, and of course this is very convenient because it doesn't seem to happen often, but when the Chamber of Secrets first gets mentioned, before she ends up asking Professor Benz about it, she says that she seems to remember reading something about it in Hogwarts of History, but she left her copy at home. Which, by the way, why didn't she just send an owl to her fucking parents and be like, "Hey, could you send me this book that I forgot?" I mean, surely they understand how to work with owls by now. And it would just be but whatever. That's neat. We're veering off into the weeds. Let's see here. Right. So Hermione's going through the ingredients, which include all kinds of yummy things like lacewing flies and leeches and fluxweed and nutgrass and blah 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 blah. But then she's like, there's like things that they're not going to have, and that they're going to have to steal. And then she also mentions that they're going to need a bit of who they're going to be changing into. And Ron's like, whoa. Time out, bruh. What the hell you talking about? I'm not finna eat nothing with crab's toenails in it. And Hermione is like, right, well, we don't have to worry about that yet. She just kind of like ignores him, and Harry's like, BTW, you realize we're fitting to have to steal like all kinds of shit, like all kinds of shit, and he's like, what are we going to break into Snape's private stores? And even Harry's like, I don't know if this is a good idea. And this is when we come back yet again to Hermione, like, totally, like, being like, listen, if you don't want to find out, then... And she says, if you're going to chicken out, fine. Like, she totally, like, calls them names, kind of, like that's so not terribly in character for Hermione, but I don't think that it's meant to be like or not say meant to be. I don't think it's an error or just like a plot device. I think that the idea is that even though Hermione isn't sure about Draco, she has like a legit issue with him, and I think she would love to find out that he was the one and get him expelled. Like, as I said in the last episode, I've been listening to the books, but I'm like further ahead, so I just finished Goblet of Fire, but somewhere in Goblet of Fire, she hears, it's when they're on the train to Hogwarts. Draco's talking about Durmstrang. However the fuck you're supposed to say that. Anyway, and he's talking about how, like, his father was considering sending him there or something, and how about how they, take the dark arts more seriously, and they actually perform the curses and all this, that, and the other. And Hermione says, like, I wish he would have gone there, then we wouldn't have had to deal with him. Like, and so this is something I was thinking about earlier today. Even though, like, sort of like the top billing for, like, arch enemies in this story, especially through the first, like, 4 books, is Harry against Malfoy. Like, they're like the main protagonist and antagonist in the story. Well, I mean, Snape is a pretty big antagonist too, so it's kind of like a toss-up between the two of them. Maybe some people will say that it's more one than the other. I should probably know better, but I'm just thinking of it offhand. They seem to both, work pretty well in there against Harry. But anyway, as far as like rivals at school and stuff like kind of like a mirror to James and Snape. But that's not the only situation. Like in other words, Malfoy manages to not only have like this rivalry with Harry, which mostly revolves around the fact that Harry's famous and isn't allied with his family, and like the families that like are the purebloods and everything. He actually is, for all intents and purposes, more rude to both Ron and Hermione individually than he is to Harry. Like, I mean, he does say rude things about, like, Harry's parents and stuff like that, but it's like, I don't know, like, the way he insults Ron and his family, to me, is some of the most, like, just foul shit that he ever says. But, and damn it, where does Hermione smack the shit out of Draco? Has that already happened, or is that happening later? See, I'm lost. But my point is that they all have beef, because he gives Hermione shit about being a mudblood, and so, and I'm not saying that word like, you understand. It's what Draco says, for being Muggle-born. Let me rephrase myself. I don't want to say that word so cavalierly. Anyway, and so my point simply is that instead of it being just about Ron and Hermione like defending Harry because Harry has this rivalry against this guy that he doesn't like, and they're just sticking up for him, he has sort of like an antagonistic role against all 3 of them, and so they all have their own reasons for hating him in addition to supporting each other. So anyway, that brings me back to the fact that Hermione is the one here at this point in the story who is driving the rule breaking and the extracurricular activities that they can't tell anybody about, that will involve stealing from like the most scary teacher in the school. Must stay hydrated. It's very important. Listen to the oyster. By the way, that inadvertently reminded me, and of course, I don't have it in front of me right now, but I appreciate, and I really wanted to do this more thoroughly, but because I'm not in front of the computer, it's not as easy to do. The people who answer in the comments, you are much appreciated, and it's helpful. I wanted to actually like bring up okay, so fine. If I said that it would be a good idea, I have a producer kind of, sort of, slash director, that it would be a good idea for me to bring back up the questions that were answered, so as to kind of like follow up on that for people who may not have actually read the comments because they listened to it before the comments were left, and they would have had no reason to go back and look. But I don't remember them all right now. I do remember that Jorge answered some of my questions about beheadings and in regards to, well, I got information about Mrs. Norris from a few different people, or a couple of different people, both on Facebook and on YouTube, and so that was really cool too. So the whole thing is that it's a character from another book. Was it a Jane Austen novel? I can't remember now. Anyway, but it's possible that it wasn't really that it was just a cutesy name, and that it wasn't, any relation to a Mr. Norris of any kind. Anyway, that's all I can remember right now. I don't want to get too far off, but anyway, yes. So thank you guys for those things. It always is helpful to kind of like discuss amongst your friends that are also either obsessed like you are, or or just have knowledge that you don't, or both. And so yeah, so Hermione's. We're back to the present here. Hermione is. She's totally peer pressuring them into to doing this. But she does say here, okay, and this is a good point. She's like, I think that threatening Muggleborns is far worse than brewing up a difficult potion. But if you don't want to find out if it's Malfoy, I'll go straight to Madame Pince and take the book back. She's just like, taking my shit and going home if you guys aren't into it. But so she's kind of making a point there too, like that obviously she knows that she's in the line of fire, and not just herself, because she's not that selfish. But that means, anybody else that's like her, that's Muggle-born, and obviously I'm sure she has additional empathy for anybody who's born into that, because she already seen how she's been treated, and she can imagine that it's the same for them too, and sometimes worse depending on just the proximity of other people that are shitty. So anyway, and Ron's like, I never thought I'd see the day when you'd be persuading us to break rules, and he's like, fine, but he's like, no toenails, please. And it is kind of weird, like, Polyjuice Potion, they almost always use hair, and I'm just like, does the hair dissolve? Please tell me the hair dissolves, because, like, the last motherfucking thing anybody wants to do is drink something and get a hair caught in their throat. It's just like, gag reflex city. Anyway, and so then we get to the last, hurdle, but not really a hurdle, but the last thing that, like, almost gets a rejection, but doesn't. Harry's like, so how long will it take us to get this amazingly difficult potion brewed? And she's like, well, this has got to be picked at the full moon, and this has got to stew for 21 days, blah, 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 blah. She's like, about a month. And they're like, Jesus, a month? Like, there could be all kinds of more attacks and Hermione's like, motherfucker, if you object again. And they're like, but it's a good plan, so let's do it. And so and Harry's like, but Ron's like, but Harry, if you just knock Malfoy off his broom in the match tomorrow, that would save us a lot of trouble. But of course, we know that's not exactly how it's going to go down. So, the next scene is the Quidditch match. I know that not everybody's a sports fan, and so for some people, the Quidditch matches are like the most boring parts of the books. That's not the case for me. I think it's kind of a brilliant game, actually. But and I would say it's more of a game than a sport, but it's still somewhat athletic. Anyway, mainly the throwing and catching bits. Because flying is kind of just like, I don't know. I mean, it's hard to say what. I don't know if the brooms in the movies are Rowling's basic design, or if there were set designers that came up with them, and she was like, "Yeah, okay, that's close enough." Either way, if it was magical, it would. It works the way it seems to. It doesn't seem like it's a particularly whatever. It's an unnecessary tangent. All I'm saying is that it's an interesting game to me. But I will try not to draw out this section because it's not that necessary. Although it does have some interesting bits, and we'll deal with them. So, Harry gets up early, goes down to breakfast early. The team's there, and then they go to the thing, and they do the thing, and they get their stuffs on, their robes. And Wood does his ridiculous speech in this case. I mean, not all of it's ridiculous. I mean, he makes some good points. He's like, Slytherin have better brooms than us, but we've got better people on our brooms, which is, A, true, and B, a good way to motivate your people. And he's like, talking about how they've trained harder and blah, blah, blah. And he's like, let's make them rue the day they let that little bit of slime Malfoy buy his way onto their team. And so that the ridiculous part is when he's like, it'll be down to you, Harry. You got to get that snitch before Malfoy or die trying. And Fred's like, no, so no pressure. But yeah, so anyway, that kind of becomes like a thing that he said, and we'll see why that matters in a few minutes. It's horrible weather. Isn't it horrible weather? This is the right match, right? Maybe not. Maybe I am mixing up matches. All right. Anyway, so they take off. They start the game, and Malfoy says something stupid, and then Harry, right as he's about to before he even has a chance to say anything, a bludger comes at him, and so he has to duck out of the way, and George comes by and knocks it. And then the same one comes back towards him again. Because George knocked it one way and it didn't even get all the way where it was going before it changed direction in midair and came back. Slowed down, stopped in the physics. And so it comes back by him. Harry gets out of the way again. George hits it again. So anyway, so again, not to play-by-play everything, but the point is this. One of these bludgers is not like the other, and it is going for nobody but Harry. And so, the Weasley twins catch on pretty quickly, and so now, before too long, they're riding around, following Harry. Oh, and then it does start to rain. I thought bad weather came into play here, too. And so he's flying around trying to avoid this bludger. And then he hears, the score is Slytherin in the lead, 60-0, and he can't see what's going on down there at all because of the rain. And so now Fred and George are, flying next to him, blah, 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 and they're like, what the hell, this bludger's messed up, and they're like, okay, we need to get time out. So they get time out, and so they have to explain, because Wood's all pissed off, where the hell have you guys been? And they're like, yeah, there's this one bludger that's just attacking Harry. And so Which, by the way, I don't know. This is like one of those weird things, but I mean, obviously, we're going to find out who's controlling it later, but later in this chapter. But you notice that when they take time out, all of a sudden it's not doing anything roguish anymore. It's just presumably like just kicking it around up in the air, like flying around, waiting for them to take off again. Which I guess that's how Bludgers would always be if the team takes time out. I don't really understand how that magic works, but whatever. And so, yeah, Harry's just like, you know what? Screw this shit. You guys go deal with the other Bludger, and I'll, like, dodge this one a bunch and, keep an eye out for the snitch. And Fred protests, and Alicia, is like, you can't do this. But they're like, well, we can't have an inquiry because if we stop, we'll have to forfeit the match. And Harry's like, we're not losing to Slytherin just because of this shit. He's like, tell them to leave me alone, Oliver. So and that's when George is like, yeah, get the snitch or die trying. That was a real fucking smart thing to say, Wood. Good job, buddy. This is your fault. So, and then Madam Hooch comes over, and Wood sees that Harry looks really determined, and so he's like, fine. Fred, George, deal with the other shit, and let him deal with this on his own. So, which, if you think about it, like, aside from the fact that it puts Harry at a disadvantage, it means that now there's only one Bludger in the match, and with Fred and George both being able to focus on the one, like, they can really, kick ass. But, anyway, so the rain's falling more and more, and this isn't the one where Hermione, helps Harry with his glasses. That must be later. So I'll get into that whenever that chapter actually happens. Sure. And so, right, so Harry, like, kicks off, and as soon as he gets back in the air, he hears the Bludger after him again, so he starts, like, doing, like, all kinds of weird maneuvers to keep because, I mean, even though it's coming after him, it's slow and heavy, so it has to, like, turn around, and it doesn't, like, make quick turns or sharp turns easily, so he just has to kind of do, like, a silly kind of up and down, back and forth kind of thing, a roller coaster type of deal, and just keeping an eye out for the snitch. So, yeah, more of that. Malfoy makes fun of him because of the way he's, moving around. And then he looks back and he sees the damn snitch, like, right above Malfoy. And Malfoy's looking at Harry, like, laughing at him, and he's not even seeing it. And Harry, like, has, like, a moment of indecision where he's like, shit. It's right there above him, but if I go for him right now, he's going to look up and see it. And then while he's waiting, all of a sudden, the snitch, like, slams into him, and it, like, breaks his right arm, in the elbow area. And so he, like, almost falls off his broom. He, like, falls sideways, and then, and he hears the Bludger coming back again. And so Harry swerves out of the way, and he's like, just go for Malfoy. So he flies straight at Malfoy. Malfoy doesn't realize what's going on at this point. He, like, kind of freaks out, and so he just dodges out of the way, and then the snitch is somehow still magically there. And so Harry uses his non-broken arm, just holding onto the broom with his legs, and makes the catch, and then manages to make it to the ground before he, like, falls on the wet ground and passes out, but they win. Da-da. It's it's pretty cool. That's a good way to win, a broken arm and all. It's a good story. Right, so and so, yeah, and then he passes out, or he faints, as they love to say. Excuse me. Right, and so then he comes back around, and then he sees Lockhart, like, kind of out of focus above him, and he's like, no, not you. Fuck, man, like, just, and I have to say, with Harry, like, passing out on the pitch, it seems highly unlikely that the only adult that would be around after he woke back up would be Lockhart. Like McGonagall's there. We know she's there. She's always there. Dumbledore's not always there, but McGonagall and Snape were definitely there. It was Gryffindor versus Slytherin. Either one of them should be in how is it just Lockhart alone? I don't really buy it, Rowling. I don't. I mean, I know it makes for a silly scene and sets up the next scene and all of that good stuff. So it's an excellent plot device, but I don't know. Maybe somebody will chime in and be like, "Well, this is why they're not there," and I'll be like, "Oh, you're right again," but it's not clicking in my brain right now. So anyway, Lockhart's like, don't worry, I'll fix your arm. And he's like, no, whoa, nope, I'm good. I'll stay broken. I don't need your help. You're shoddy. But anyway, he can't sit up because he's in so much pain. And then, of course, fucking Colin Creevey is taking pictures, and Harry's like, I don't want pictures of this, Colin. Damn it. And Harry's like, Lockhart's like, oh, all right, here we go. And no big deal, simple charm. I've done it many times. He's like, I just want to go to the hospital wing. And Wood's like, he really should go to the hospital wing. And of course, in the midst of that, Wood's still kind of like, but good job with the snitch there, Harry. Nice capture, best yet. And Harry then notices Fred and George wrestling the rogue Bludger back into the box. And I guess there's the argument to be made that you always kind of have to wrestle a Bludger back into the box once you're done with the match, but I never really understood like how you get them back under control exactly. When Wood first shows them to Harry, he lets one out and he sort of manages to sort of catch it as it's coming in and tackle it to the ground, like almost like follow it. So I don't know. Anyway, but it says that it's putting up a terrific fight. But I'm like, don't they always when you're putting them back in the box? I don't know if that's true or not. That's sort of how it was made to seem in the movie, but that's not. Anyway, so Lockhart's like, stand back. And Harry's like, no, please, no. Fuck. Here we go. Mr. Pixie's at it again. And, so yeah. Lockhart casts his just charm, and it must not have been what he thought it was going to be. And Harry like starts to feel this weird sensation in his arm and his shoulder, and like things get weird, and then like basically all the fucking bones go away. And it says that he feels like his arm was being deflated. And of course Lockhart's like, oh, well, that can happen. Well, just, go on up to the hospital wing. I'm like, so now you're going to send him up to the hospital wing. I'm like, did Lockhart actually think he was going to solve this problem? Did he really think that whatever he was about to do was actually going to work? Like, that's the part about him that I don't really get sometimes. Like, I understand, like, when we get later to, like, what actually is the real deal with him, those things make sense to me. But, like, what he it seems like he would be better at, like, just talking about it, but, like, avoiding the practical situations where he might actually have to, like, show off that he's not as good as he pretends to be. So why he would be like, oh, let me take care of your arm. It's going to be great. No big deal. And I don't know. It's a little strange. So anyway, of course, Ron and Hermione help Harry to go to the hospital wing, and so Harry finally like gets up the courage to look down at his arm, and it's basically just like a big, Like, I don't like a comical version of what you would imagine what your arm would look like when it doesn't have bones in it is what actually happens here. Um, and he can't move it. He can't do anything with it. So yeah, the bones are removed. So Madame Pomfrey is pissed off, and she's like, "You should have come straight to me." And for some reason, I get irritated every time I read that part because I'm like, he did say that he wanted to, and like if I was Harry, I'd be like, "That's what I said," but they wouldn't. He doesn't ever say that though. Anyway, and so she's like, "Well, I could have fixed it really easily, but now that you've got to grow it back, well, that's gonna suck. You're gonna have to stay the night and drink Skelly Grow." Skelly Grow being the bone growing potion. So Ron can't help but like get a dig in at Lockhart, which you can't really blame him because it was such inept work there. Like he really should have just either done something that he knew would work or done nothing at all. And Hermione's like, anybody can make a mistake. And she's like, it doesn't hurt anymore, does it? And Harry's like, yeah, that's great, but it doesn't do anything. So anyway, so he gets the Skelly Grow, and she explains that it's going to be painful, and it's a nasty business, and all that good stuff, and the Skelly Grow tastes shitty, and it burns, and, so anyway, so she leaves, Madame Pomfrey leaves Ron and Hermione along with Harry for a little while, and then, and Hermione, well, Ron mentions Malfoy, like how he looked, ready to kill after he lost the match, and Hermione's like, I want to know how he fixed that bludger, and it's like she's really bought into the idea that he's the one making bad shit happen. Anyway, and so yeah, of course, Harry's like, well, that's one of the things we can ask him when we get the Polyjuice potion going, so blah, 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 blah. And then the rest of the Gryffindor Quidditch team bust into the hospital wing, and they all, they're like, oh man, it was amazing, blah, blah, blah. And they say that George says that he's just seen Flint, the Slytherin captain, yelling at Malfoy about the snitch being right above him and not noticing it, and Malfoy not being happy. Anyways, and of course they're like brought all kinds of food and shit, and they're just about to get down, and then of course Madame Pomfrey comes out, and she's like, nope, this boy's got to grow 33 bones. Peace. And so they have to all leave, and now that sucks because Harry and Hermione, Ron and Hermione were like there, but now they're all gone. So Harry's like, well, shit. Now I'm just gonna be here with my hurting arm. So he apparently goes to sleep or whatever. It's a new scene, and then hours later, he wakes up in the middle of the night, and his arm is hurting. It says that it feels like it's full of large splinters, which does sound kind of horrible. And he thinks at first that that's why he woke up, but then he realizes that somebody was sponging his forehead in the dark. And then we realize that it's Dobby, who does creepy, weird things like that. Like there's at least 2 occasions where Harry wakes up to Dobby, like being right over him like that. In the books, he doesn't mean anything by it. Of course, he's just a strange little creature, but he's a good guy. He means well anyway. Let's just say that. And of course, the first thing Dobby says to Harry is like, "Harry Potter came back to school." And because the warning was at the beginning of the book, and so he's like, "I warned you, and I warned you, and you came anyway." And he's like, "I didn't. Why did you come? Why didn't you go back home when you missed the train?" And Harry's like, "Wait a minute, time the fuck out. How did you know I missed the train?" And then Harry's like, "Motherfucker, it was you. You blocked the barrier. You're the reason why." He's like, "Man, I almost got expelled." And he's like, and Dobby's like, "Yeah, I had to iron my hands after that too, by the way. BTW. And so yeah, Dobby's on and on about it. He's like, "I didn't think you'd find another way to get to school." and Dobby manages to get in another mention of him getting beat because he let Malfoy's dinner burn. I don't know. I just realized that. Whatever. I don't think that it's actually been mentioned yet about who owns him, but so spoiler alert there. And Harry's like, yeah, you almost got me and Ron expelled. He's like, you better get out of here before the bones come back in my arm. I might strangle you. And Dobby's like, yeah, death threats. I get that all the time. Not a big, like 5 times a day at home. Harry's like, oh, Jesus, this guy's so pathetic. Like, it's hard not to feel bad for him. Like, it's hard to stay mad at him. And so then he's like, why do you wear that pillowcase, BTW? And Dobby's like, oh, well, that's like kind of a mark of our enslavement, which we're sowing the seeds for spew in the next book, I can say. But also the seeds for later things in this book, too. But Dobby's like, yeah, elves can't wear proper clothes. It's like, that's how we get freed if we were presented with clothes. So and it even says, Dobby says, the family is careful not to pass Dobby even a sock, sir. Boom! A sock. Because, yeah, then he would be free to leave their house forever. Anyway, so then he's back on his, like, Harry Potter must go home. And Dobby's like, Dobby thought his bludger would be enough. And Harry's like, whoa. Damn it, I had just gotten over being angry with your ass, and now I'm pissed again. Your bludger? Are you trying to kill me? He's like, no. Just grievously injure. I'm not trying to kill you. I'm trying to save you. And Harry's like, oh, just enough to be sent home, huh? Great. And so Harry's like, are you gonna, like, if you're gonna keep doing this shit, are you gonna at least tell me why you're trying to, like, get me sent home? And Dobby, like, does his inner agonizing Dobbiness, because, he wants to be able to tell him, but of course he's still a house elf in service to a family, and so he's not really supposed to be saying anything. So he's struggling, but he's like, so Dobby makes this really interesting point here about how Harry's, as he calls it, triumph over Voldemort was like this big deal for, like, his kind. Like, even though he says, he's like, well, not really me, because my family treats me like shit anyway, but many elves saw increased, or not increased, but like better treatment post Voldemort after he was gone. People weren't under the Imperious Curse anymore. People, like, there was just better conditions for house elves in general. So basically he just says, like, anybody who was, like, sort of downtrodden and stuff, like the world has been better since Harry Potter came along. And so Dobby doesn't want to see Harry, hurt in any way or potentially killed, because he's been, like, sort of like a beacon, as it were. So yes, in fact, like a beacon of hope, it says. So it's kind of, amazing, really. I mean, it's because, I mean, obviously it's not something that Harry did. Harry was a 1-year-old baby, but nonetheless, like the symbolic meaning of what happened there had a huge effect on like a group of, which is interesting because no other house elf ever brings it up, but Dobby does. But Dobby is, unique, but still. But I mean, obviously, if Dobby says that it meant a lot to house elves, then we don't really see, we only see like 3 total outside of Hogwarts, and then all of them end up at Hogwarts eventually, but in one way or another. And so my point being is that, like, the Hogwarts house elves have probably seen the best treatment of all of them anyway, because they work for Dumbledore. So, at least for the last however many years. Oh, and so Dobby finally, like, in the midst of, like, trying to explain everything, he does let slip that the Chamber of Secrets has been opened again, and that's when Dobby grabs Harry's water jug and cracks himself over the head with it. And then he comes back up cross-eyed. I mean, there's like a bit of I mean, it's like, it's pitiful, but it's also kind of like a physical comedy kind of gag too, because he, like, knocks himself out of sight and, like, crawls back into the thing. So it's like he's, like, simultaneously like pitiful and, like, sad, and also kind of silly. And so Harry's like, but so what you're saying is that there is a Chamber of Secrets, and he said it's been opened before. He's like, tell me, and he catches Dobby this time so he can stop him from, banging himself over the head, because you got to be quick with Dobby. And he's like, I'm not Muggle-born. How's it, a problem for me? And Dobby's like, don't ask me anything else, please. He's just saying, like, dark deeds are going to be happening, or are planned. But he's like, Harry Potter must go home, Harry Potter must go home, Harry Potter, It's really like a refrain at this point. And Harry's like, who? And he's like, Dobby can't say. And he's like, just go home, Harry Potter, go home. And Harry's like, I'm not going anywhere. And he's like, one of my best friends is Muggle-born, so she would be, like, first in line if the chamber is open. And so, of course, Dobby fawns over him even more, because he's like, oh, you risk your life for your friends. But he's like, even so, you gotta save yourself. And Harry's just like, God damn it, man. Like, enough of your shit. Like, Dobby is just insanely persistent in this chapter. I mean, for good reason, but all the same, it's like, fuck, man. And then, in the midst of his pleading, he stops because they hear footsteps coming. And so Dobby's like, all right, I'm out. Crack. And he's gone. And Harry's like, oh, Jesus. So then he lays back down, and the next thing, the door open at the foot of the ward, and Dumbledore is backing in with a long woolly dressing gown, because it's Dumbledore, and he's carrying one end of what looks like a statue, and McGonagall comes in after him, and they lay this statue, which of course turns out to be a person, and one of the beds. Harry's pretending to be asleep. They get Madame Pomfrey, blah, 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 blah. And so then Madame Pomfrey comes in, and she's like, what the hell? And Dumbledore's like, yeah, another attack. McGonagall found him. And they said there were a bunch of grapes next to him, they're surmising that perhaps he was on his way sneaking up to see Harry. And Harry's like, what? So he, like, looks over very slowly and raises himself up so he can see, and he realizes that it's Colin Creevey. Poor little Colin. Which, by the way, this is such a kind of fucked up bit of foreshadowing that I forget about. But if you have read all the books, then you know what I mean. Like I said, I'm just picky and choosy with my spoilers. Sometimes I'll just blurt them out. Other times I'll hang on to them. I'm going to hang on to this one. Anyway, so yeah, they confirmed that he is in fact petrified. Okay, but wait a minute. And then McGonagall says, but I shudder to think if Albus hadn't been on the way downstairs for hot chocolate, who knows what might have... But Dumbledore just said that McGonagall found him. So which one found him? I don't fucking understand that. I've never really paid attention to that before, but... Right? Oh, no, hang on. Yeah, Dumbledore says Minerva found him on the stairs, and then McGonagall says if Albus hadn't been on the way downstairs for hot chocolate. So who the fuck found him, and why are they lying? One of them did, one of them didn't, but not both of them at the same time, or if they would have said that, right? I don't know. I've never noticed that before. Maybe there's something I'm missing there. Please help me if you know what I'm missing. Anyway, so right, they're looking at him, and then they realize that he's got a camera out in front of him, but his arms are all stuck out, and they're like, maybe he got a picture of his attacker, and because God knows he's taking pictures of everything. And Dumbledore opens the camera, and this acrid smoke, burnt plastic comes out, and so yeah, it melted the film was melted, and they're like, what does it mean, Albus? And he's like, Dumbledore's like, it means that the Chamber of Secrets is indeed open again. And they're like, but who? And Dumbledore, in his elegant, mysterious way, is like, the question is not who, the question is how. So he answers, but he doesn't really answer, and if you know what he means, then it makes sense, but otherwise, it doesn't. And Harry can see that McGonagall has no idea either, and he doesn't either. And that is the way that chapter ends. So, what did we have here? We had Hermione being the leader in the rule breaking for reasons mostly related to Muggle-born attacks, I think, maybe. And also the fact that she knows that she's the one who can get, she knows that she's the only one of the three of them that's going to brew that potion. So if they want to try and do this, they're going to have to do it her way. What else? I feel like there's more, but that's... also, Malfoy sucks still. Oh, that was the other thing. Lockhart is a complete fucking hack. And it's like, if you didn't know it before now, it should start to be sinking in pretty good by now. But, I mean, obviously, it's pretty obvious anyway. But, yeah, I think that's about it. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm messing with my phone here to get it where I can stop the recording in a second. Hopefully this quality will be decent, and you'll be able to hear what I'm saying and all that good stuff, and we will catch you in the next one, which maybe we'll do another unplugged episode. It depends on what's up with my computer. So we'll hope for good things for the computer. All right, everybody. Peace.